Sean, please join us.
Sure.
These seats are for you. You just want to watch. These Americans, you know.
Whatever it is, I'm sure it's terrible. Hi.
So,
anyway.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, thank you all came. Thank you that that not all of you are my friends. I appreciate it very much. There is maybe 5 or 6 new faces for me. So,
Wow.
thank you. Marketing is working. Yeah. So,
Are you on TikTok?
yes, of course. Do I look like I'm not in TikTok? So, all this event will be recorded by the national television and Mačerbaník. So, if you miss something or you just don't understand my fucking bad English, which I'm aware of, you can find it later. So, I want to thank our sponsorship. So, there is Slovak Arts Council here. There is Lita Creative Industries, Proactiva. Thanks for them, we are here. And I really want to thank you, Kino Úsmev, because without them, we will be now on the street. So, that's for the formalities. So, let me introduce myself. My name is Tomáš Straka. I'm national organizer for Slovakia. And that's all. Mainly the East Slovakia. Also writer, also art.
Great poet, yes.
Thank you. So, and let me introduce our special guest. This one is most special. Oh. So, 4 of them are judges.
Yes.
1 of them is special guest. 1 of them is the voice of Lenka Šafranová. So, I start. Which one? I start with the guy who has tattooed our sponsorship in his forehead. So, Bob Hýsek, Czech Republic. Co-founder of Slam Poetry, Czech Republic. University teacher, my great friend, editor of Legalization magazine about marijuana.
We were freed yesterday. The highest court said that it is allowed to write about ganja, you know.
Oh. Fantastic.
Free speech.
Free speech.
Finally, you know.
Free speech. Sorry. It was for Slovak audience. So, another one from Budapest. Like, you know, we are in Košice, so I have to start with Czech and not with Magyar because this is our national identity. From Budapest, the Hungarian champion and European champion of 2018. I was there, it was fantastic when he went. Also university teacher, also free speech activist, fantastic man, Péter Molnár. Then our own Slovakian and no other, as a culture should be in Slovakia. My very special guest, my very good friend, university teacher, curator of East Slovakian Museum, writer, poet, Lenka Šafranová. And Lenka Šafranová decides that my bad English is only bad English we will hear today. So also big applause for her interpreter, Simona Kuzmová. And also we want to present Slovak as a language to our foreign guests. For example, Sean never been in Slovakia, never heard of it before.
Oh, come on.
So, the last member of the jury, our very special guest from New York, but he is like typical New Yorkian. I now live in New York, but I live in other parts of America. You know, you can say it like from Bratislava. Yes, I live in Bratislava, but I live in other parts of Slovakia. You know, typical New Yorkian. Poet, writer, What else?
I do everything but dance. Yeah.
Everything but
I also
dance.
teach college at one point too. So
University professor.
Yeah.
And lover. No. Lover of second-hand shop. I think he spent 100 euros for pink shirts for €1 today. Patrick Mulroy. And the last one, our very special guest, the author of the idea of European Championships. If we doesn't have Philip, we doesn't have European Championships at all. Director of World Poetry Slam organization, also university teacher, also my good friend, Philip Meersman. Thank you. So, discussion will goes like this. I will ask you a question, and you can react, always. Also, and if we will be too long, then discussion will be moving to the bar. So we have like one and a half hour guarantee in this space, and then unlimited time guarantee on the bar. So I will ask which one? I didn't see the text. I'm sorry. No. I will ask Philip first. You are founder of this idea of European Championships. How and why?
So 1 hour and a half. Okay. When I took over in Belgium, because there was somebody organizing this before me in 2007, and then I started in 2008. We, from the beginning, already did this bilingual as a Belgian championship. So you have a French-speaking side and you have a Dutch-speaking side. At that moment, the French-speaking was always competing in France, and the Dutch-speaking were always competing in Holland.
Okay.
And the German-speaking were always competing with the Slam Meisterschaft in Germany. So the idea became sort of like, yeah, let's do this in Belgium. So we need to do then things with translations, projections, and whatsoever. And then in 2009, we were invited via a European youth program in Berlin. And I think that at that moment, almost everybody who was organizing national or regional slam championships were there in Berlin at that moment during that project. And we're sort of discussing with the people like, hey, yeah, but you're doing this, you're doing that. Hey, why not organize a European championships? And so like, yeah, that's a very good idea. And then, but nothing happened. And then, because, it's sort of like, yeah, people smoke and marijuana and drink and whatsoever. And then, yeah, okay, if there is an idea, and then people say that it's not possible to do that, that's the first thing that I will then try to do, is to try it. And then since 2010, we were trying to start to find funding and whatsoever, and then in 2012, finally we got the first European Championships, and I was sort of asked to all the organizers, who wants to organize this as a voluntary type of thing, because it was not, and for Europe it's still not an official structure. So yeah, and then Creatief Schrijven in Antwerp started with that, where there was a hard learning curve, and then Serbia wanted to do that in 2013 with the support of the United Nations, but then for one reason or the other it didn't go through. They didn't find the funding. For me from the beginning it was very important to not do it always at the same place, because for instance in France you have the one in Paris and you have the one in Tours, and it's always there, and it would be easy to do it in one place because it's easier to get funding, it's easier to sort of get a name for a space. But we noticed even also in 2009 we noticed that styles, rules, ideas, the way how yes or no, it's professionalized or whatsoever. It differs per region or per country. And that was sort of like, yeah, let's make it a moving championship.
Okay.
So, and that's where it started, and we are now at the 11th edition since 2012, and we survived a lot. And I must say that I'm very proud of as somebody who started this, that we can say that you are the first organizer who completely got it funded locally, nationally. Which before that never happened.
Yeah.
Because that is always a big problem, because still in a lot of countries there is no, and then I'm talking even worldwide, it's still informal groups of people that organize the scene or a championship or whatsoever. It's not a formal structure. So the fact that you don't have a formal structure is always problematic to get funding from a government or even from a sponsor or whatsoever. So, but that's sort of like in a very short version of it.
So I have to say, like proud local patriot, half of our money is not for Slovakia but from Košice. So without this city we will be fucked, like completely. Peter, I will ask you, because you are the second most familiar with the format. You compete in European Championship, you win the European Championship, now you are in jury. What it meant for you to be there in Budapest, in your city, and to win there, and what did it mean, this European Championship, for you?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you again, Thomas, and also Katarina, for putting this together. I feel these days are such special, precious moment in life. I would stop time, actually, and it wouldn't end, but sadly at some point it will end. And I'm happy to be here. And yeah, it was a celebration in Budapest as well. My attitude was that I thought that it always what a slammer can do, to sort of like present, to give the nicest possible present as what she or he can to others there, and share something which is really, which really comes from her or his heart. For me, slam is about that. It's about freedom of speech and not sort of technical knowledge or something like that. It's about it. If it comes from heart, credible. If the person is shaking because it's such a emotional thing to share that thing, then, and if it's a credible shaking, so it's not like someone, oh, I may get some scores. That's the end of it. If that sort of approach. And then it was wonderful to be among the other slammers, and I think somehow I was in like later a writer poet friend said that you were in trance or something like that. So like another friend said super focused, because I was like trying to do the best, and then obviously it's a huge honor that I became one of the European champions. And after it happened, then I created the Underground Slam Academy, because I thought that the next step is to contribute that way as well, as much as I can, to poetry slam. And I remember maybe just one thing, that when I started to prepare my slams, I was talking to a very experienced Hungarian slammer. He's also a rapper, he won the first 2 Hungarian championships. Süveg Mark Said is his name. He's a wonderful person. And I talked to him and I started to prepare my text in English because I thought that's what one should do for any. And Mark told me, because he was already at some European championships, he told me that, Peter, this is a meeting of languages, of our European languages. So upon his advice, I started to prepare it in Hungarian and then did the translation as others. He also said, maybe it's not too late for if there are some performers here in the audience, that he also said it was so important to put not a lot of text on one page of the translation so the audience can follow. Second, make sure that someone who will move the text for you can really catch the rhythm. So Christoph Horváth-Szín is a wonderful, another wonderful slammer. He was moving the text for me, and also a female slammer at some point. Anyway, so those were part of it, and it was a sort of a life-changing experience in a way. And afterwards, and I finished with this, Tomáš so kindly he did an interview with me and Niki Dekány, a slammer, the Hungarian slammer from Slovakia, made the translation, and then the biggest Hungarian literature site published it also in Hungarian, and the title was, because I said I want to do slam until I live and I may die on slam stage. and then the Hungarian version appeared with the title I will die. So maybe this is
there was some hope, you know.
The hope was lost in translation.
Yeah. Bob, you are one of the main organizers in Czech scene. Czech scene is very closed, I think. It is like big scene inside of Czech Republic, but you are one of very few people who actively organize the international slams and try to do something more with it, like Femislam, slam just for the females, and you're really searching out of the genre. Why is for you important to do this internationally and to invent the new genres in slam?
Well, basically it just came as an instinct, as something that was needed right at the moment, and when we tried it out, it turned out that it works perfectly fine. So what we often do is slamateurs, events for people who are starting with slam, you know, the open mics for first-time slammers. I love that. I love that more than the professional ones, because the professional ones, you know, they're like, everyone is like another one, you know, it's something like robotic, you know, but those people who are giving their best and shaking on the stage and then falling to their ashes and standing up as the phoenix bird, you know, amazing. I love that. It's a huge emotional experience, and I always feel like being in Chicago with Mark Smith, you know, at those times, you know, it's something ancient in that. And also, you know, slam for me is not show business, it's basically therapy. Yeah, I teach poetry slam at a university, and I started in the year 2006, and I had one student. Only one person came, a friend of mine. We talked about poetry. Then next semester 2 guys, next semester 3 guys. Now I have 15 regular guys who are there for their credits, and 5 or 6 or 7 more are coming again after the other term, you know, repeating the class. And there are kids from secondary schools and even elementary schools coming in, you know, and reading their stuff, and it's a safe space, and I just love it, you know. The same way Femislam was created, you know, because the Czech scene is so macho. We have never had a single president, female president, a single female prime minister, nothing like that, you know. And it's the same thing in slam, you know. This weekend, 21st male in row won the championship. Straight males only.
Oh my God.
It's crazy, you know. So I created FemiSlam 9 years ago, and it was successful. First, there was like at that time there were 2 professional women doing poetry slam, and the rest I just got them together, my students and all. Some of them came by mistake, wanted to say no. I said no, you have to go. They ended up being champions, you know. So throughout the years, it was incredible. Today we have like a list of 100 women, you know, slamming actively, and they are great. I mean, I love FemiSlam. 2 days ago, the 9th FemiSlam was in my city. It was the best slam ever. So deep, you know. The time limit is 5 minutes, which is much better. You know, it's the 3-minute pieces are spoken, are narrated more calmly, more dramatically. It felt just right. You could follow it, you know, you could enjoy it. All the women, they brought out great themes, stuff about their, what is it like to be the oldest sister? You know, poems like that, you know, and violence on kids, and etc., etc., etc. It was so amazing, you know. The crowd was huge and happy, and the slammers, when we announced the winner, they grabbed her and carried her over their shoulders, and they all hugged on the stage, you know, all the girls. I don't have the pictures yet. Oh.
Next time.
Yeah. So it's weird though. It doesn't happen anywhere else. And we have the Finnish champion for last year, Diana Stoyanova, in the city. She's a legal expert. And once I invited her to my seminar, and I told her about FemiSlam, she was like, "What the fuck? Are you insane? What? I don't get it." Well, I said, "What? It's meaningful." She said, "No. What about non-binary people? What about trans people? What about queers? What about why gender?" I said, but we're this macho country, you know. I couldn't explain myself, and then I said, "Diana, what's the ratio in Finland? You know, male and female slammers?" And she says, 80 to 20 for females. I said, "Yeah, it's the other way around in Czechia still."
Yeah. But we steal this FemiSlam format from you. And
you didn't steal it. You elevated it.
Yeah.
I totally love what Tomáš does. What they do is it's a 3-day tourney in 3 cities in the region, and it's a celebration of womanhood, of queer, of the trans, of everything else. You know, it's not so competitive, even though you have a winner, and it was the Czech girl who ended up 2nd at the Czech FemiSlam 2 days ago.
It's always Czech girl who wins, you know, like...
Oh, it's impossible, you have great poets.
Yeah, so we are competing for 2nd place.
Yeah, I totally love what you are doing, you know. You have a more extended version of FemiSlam, you know. It's like... yeah, I love it.
It's MC, always, but not always, but I think last 2 years it is drag queen. So it's you know, it's
hey,
fun.
this is good for these regions. This is something new, something exceptional, something badly needed, you know.
Yeah. So let's listen to a little bit of Slovak language. So I have to ask you as the prettiest member of the jury. Sorry, Sean. Lenka, you're from completely like different environment. You have PhD in literature. You are really like this academic, you know, and you fell in love with slam somehow. You teach it. You I don't know why you love it. But why, Lenka? Why?
Pretože je to tiež druh poézie, tak ako akýkoľvek iný druh poézie. Takže sa ním zaoberám a prečo ho mám rada? Pretože je obohatený o performatívnu zložku. A to je pre mňa mimoriadne dôležité. A ďalšia vec, že je to... Slam vznikol, a tu už začínam rozprávať trošku akademicky, ale vznikol ako druh poézie, áno, ktorý sa vymedzil voči tej tradične akademickej poézii, ktorá bola v 50., 60., čiastočne 70. rokoch. A priniesol hlas z dola. Hlas, ktorý nebol počutý a počuteľný. Čiže priniesol úplne iné témy, úplne iný typ angažovanosti aj do literatúry, aj vôbec do spoločnosti a otváral témy, ktoré boli tabu. A obzvlášť tej akademickej poézii.
Okay, so I still believe that this is a different type of poetry, slam, And why I'm interested in it is because there is a performative part to it, and it began as a contradiction to the traditional poetry, which was in the 50s, 60s, and slightly in the 70s. And I believe that finally some voice from the ground was able to speak up, and I believe that new themes were presented and that they could...
Performanciu aj cez, hovorím, samotnú tému, aj cez jej podanie. Čiže je tam veľmi dôležitý aj tento aspekt.
So what is also important that it was not only talking about things that were taboo, but they're also dealing with it, and a lot of times a solution could be found through the slam poetry. So it was dealing with different themes, with political issues, and not only in communities that were underground, but also with serious issues. And what is also important for me that it helped incentivize the society, because the traditional poetry, it doesn't have as much impact as the slam poetry, because there is the contact with the audience and the performance. It just has a different impact on the audience.
So, Sean, jury which fell from the heaven. Since we met since yesterday, you are just bitching about how America is the worst place to live. So I want to ask you, how you found the European poetry, slam poetry, themes and poets here?
I mean, you know, we were talking...
To compare with the US.
Sure, of course, you know, gosh. The thing is that like artists are a product of their society, right? So like in some ways this is about practical concerns. It is always going to be funny to me when I listen to people from this side of the ocean talk about what they consider to be poor arts funding. It's disingenuous to win, and it's like, really? Like in front of everyone for this? You know, but it does seem to be enhanced. So in answer, sort of a cyclical answer to your question, you know, I think that the scenes here are so different from one another. Some of them are so new, which is really exciting, because by the time the U.S. Poetry Slam was kind of winding down, and I understand it's coming back up, but you know, the scene that I came up through, by the end there, it was very uniform. And there was sort of like a formula that tended to win, and it was about plugging in a topic or an idea or a concept into that framework, and you know, seeing if you could shout loud enough to get the 30 you needed to move on to the final round, right? So the sort of like differences in format, differences in style, the openness to international exchange, like all of these things are things that like folks in my country can only dream about, you know. We are so damn huge as a nation that it is sort of like a thing where you could just vacation within the U.S. for the rest of your life and like never see all of it. And so in that regard, like, sure, us being very insular as a nation makes sense, but I think watching the way that everyone comes together for events like this, the degree to which everyone is open to having their work translated and presented on the fly and things like that, I mean, it's just so, it excites me so much artistically, and I do think that it is truer to the original impetus of slam, which was this idea of bringing poetry into focus for people who are not necessarily poetry experts. You know, prior to a certain period in the U.S., like, we could expect poetry to be found in like common magazines, for example, and there was a period of time, and depending on who you ask, if you ask me, I will give you a fully blown conspiracy theory for which there is evidence, because there always is, of who or why this started to become an art form that was both culturally irrelevant and largely the prominence of the rich. But poetry slam, when it was invented in the 80s by Mark Smith, and nobody else, when that happened, it really was a direct assault on a very negative influence on the oldest art form there is, you know. Poetry has been around since, you know, we were drawing things in manganese on the walls of the cave, you know.
I think it first started with a slam, you know. It's first slam, then poetry, then...
if you draw a line between all of the poems that like matter, like insofar as like are culturally relevant, are talking about the events and the affairs of everyday people in a way that is memorable, you can go all the way back to the Bedouin tribes, right? And when you're looking at those are people who are going in front of various leaders, and they are performing within a set format that has certain expectations, and the better they do it, the more money they get. It's slam. You know?
This is something that is underrepresented in studies on slam, that it's not just indeed Mark Kelly's method, the urban neighborhoods or whatsoever, but you have, for instance, like in Africa, you have the raconteurs, the sort of like the
griots,
the griots, the raconteurs, who really sort of like tell the stories. You also have that in the plains of Asia. You also have that where family stories, where poetry is used as a mnemotechnic type of thing to remember the family, tribal, whatsoever story. So there is definitely, I completely agree with the link to drawing on the cave.
If you want to look at like competition, I mean, the original Olympics had oratory competitions, right?
True.
So like, it is amazing to me that people are so often certain that they know like that their thing was the thing that started slam, but like the concept of slam, right? The idea of competitive poetry. Mark didn't come up with that. Mark came up with scoreboards, he came up with the gimmick, right? And what was smart about it, the reason why it mattered, is because he did it in a way that was difficult to take too seriously, but at the same time, somehow lended this incredible rush to winning, right? And it forces poets to, on the one hand, like, give a shit if their audience can tell what they're doing, right? Which should always be the case. People don't write music for people to not listen to it, right? For some reason, people write poetry for the sake of nothing, as best as I can tell, right? There are people who do that. So it is nice to have somebody force intelligent, competitive-minded people to create with an idea of a prospective audience, right? But in terms of there being performed competitive poetry, that comes from a number of sources, and I think really there's a lot of overlay. So maybe the last thing I'll say, in kind of bringing it back to your question again, one of the things I think is really cool about all of these different cultures engaging with one another in one place, you know, like there's certain things that we can pretty much agree on as like human beings living in the 20th, now 21st century, in terms of like, you know, this is the expectation we have for a society, or like certain things, right? But slam has enough wiggle room that it's like bringing all of these different influences to one place, and as a result, like the fact that the rules are different, but you don't care when it comes to the international competition, like that allows for a truly dazzling array of different kinds of people. But poets are kind of poets no matter where you go, right? I would say American poets are pretty beleaguered, so some of us are rather unpleasant, okay, because we're tired. No, I'm lovely. But generally speaking, you know, but I would say that, like, you know, poets are the reason why I write poetry. I did other art forms before this. The reason why I stuck with poetry wasn't just because of poetry, it was because of poets. I love poets. And so I think there's something really lovely about seeing the sort of loose configuration of people brought together to celebrate this thing that we all kind of love so much.
Peter, you want to react?
Thank you. Thank you. Just two quick comments. One is that I also agree with the connections to all sorts of oral traditions. But slam is a specific form, and also it seems to me that in a way a most important part of is this about 3 minutes time frame. Some places do it differently, but most places it seems consider the 3 minutes or 3 minutes and 10 or 15 seconds as a time frame, and that seems like a good time frame. And the other thing about what you said, how it can become a space where people are going for whatever high scores or just in a sort of almost like self-purposed way. Yeah, I think it's something to think about. How can we increase the chances of deep, heartfelt slam performances as opposed to those who try to capture the audience with some sort of like effect hunting, or things like that. Once I was talking to a good Hungarian slammer who was very good while he was doing slamming, but then he stopped performing slam, and I tried to encourage him. First he said, "I already said everything." I said, I said, being a slammer means that you can have a voice a bit louder in a good sense than others, and there are so many issues to talk about. So it's in a way, it's a task. But then he said, but there's somehow, I'm not interested anymore. And he told me, you also know what sort of lines you need to tell to win. Mm-hmm. And then I was surprised, and so of course, in a way, for all performers, it's some sort of it provides some additional energy if in a competition one is highlighted. For example, the longest running Hungarian slam club puts up the video of the first 3. Just a little thing, but then if you are among the first 3, then people can watch what you perform. So that's almost technical. But anyway, so what I try to do also with the Underground Slam Academy to move, sort of like increase the focus on heartfelt, deep slams. The way we do it there is that after hearing all the slams, there we don't score. I'm not saying it against scoring points, but in the break, the jury, among them poets and university professors and other artists, and discusses who were the best that night. And after the break, the jury provides comments for all performers.
Love that.
So and at the Underground Slam Academy, only by heart. So which is because I was thinking. Sorry, I finished then. Just a quick story. that for several times, the wonderful actor who was also director of the National Theatre in Hungary, and he was 80 years old. He performed 1-hour solo show, and afterwards he was the head of the jury for a slam competition which was about the show that he performed before. And there was this guy sitting there, 80 years old, a wonderful person, and I was like, oh, all slams should be on a high level. I mean, even a weak slam is good in a way. It's like a sociological fact. But I was thinking that in slam, of course, I cannot say that you can come, you cannot come. So, and then he had a comment on a slam which was performed by heart, that then the idea is highlighted, but the slammer is wishing to express. It's not about trying to have an impact, kind of directly. And then I figured out that from then on, the Underground Slam Academy, it's by heart. So that's some sort of field there, not in a bad sense, democratic, because everyone can do it. And then the next sort of filter is that if someone is saying some sort of artificially catchy lines, the jury will have some critical comments.
Bob, Lenka, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I'd like to comment. A friend of mine visited, it's called Green Mill, the pub where Mark Smith is doing his stuff. So he visited that in Chicago, and he said in his report that it was a fascinating night because the rules were established, people started appearing at the mic, and as the evening went on, the rules were gradually changed. So there was competition, but it was not taken seriously.
Yeah.
So this is what I would like to call that another Mark Smith's invention. First he joined poetry and dopamine, and now he's exploiting that with more dopamine and unpredictability, which destroys ego. I love that.
I would just want to sort of like, you have in Holland, you have the dice slam, where you go on stage, and at that moment the jury rolls the dice, and that's your score. And you have to perform. You don't know what it is, eh? So you perform, and then the jury needs to make comments on your performance related to the score that you had on the dice. But I mean, it's sort of like what I sometimes regret is what I always say when we come together, being it a World Championship or a European Championship, I know everybody worked hard to get there. I know that everybody definitely wants to win, but it's not about yes, it is about winning, but it's not about but it's not about the winning, because the moment that you come on stage and you see all the other people on stage, something changes. You are changed. You see different styles. There are sort of like Jonas, who did I Am a Poet I Am, for instance, very dry in Antwerp, and sort of like and now you see people sort of like going, yeah, I don't need to be so super excited and whatsoever. I can do very dry, sort of like humoristic, but very minimalistic type of things. You have other countries where you have other things. We were in Togo for the World Championships. That's then the follow-up of the European Championship, as if that was not difficult enough. We started with the World Championship. But I mean, it's so fantastic because, I mean, there are people coming from Japan, from Chile, from New Zealand, Australia, Mexico, from Finland, whatever. They are then there together, and it's a family. It's really a family. I mean, and the emotional part of things, and that the good poetry. I mean, in the World Championships, that we have now had three editions. And the 3 editions, the winner, everybody, even though whatever has happened before that, everybody agrees that the winner is the winner because this person at that moment was the one that made people cry, that or made sure that something was there. And the top, let's say 2, 3, almost everybody agrees upon. And it's because you're able to touch, you're there, it doesn't matter what gender, what color, whatever. I mean, it's about what's there, and they all talk about similar type of things. And sometimes you're sitting there, me then being a middle-aged white person, sometimes it's even, I tick the 7 boxes of what you should hate. So, I mean, higher education, males, and so on. And then you're sitting there in a room, and then you get sort of people from Africa or from Abiyala doing this sort of decolonization or anti-colonial, sort of like pointing at you as white man or whatever your ancestors and whatsoever have done wrong. But on the other hand, talking about freedom of speech, we were in Togo. There is still prison sentence for being or promoting LGBTQI rights, but we were able on national TV to sort of say that for us, as the World Poetry Slam organization, which is now a formal structure since 3 years, that for us, whatever love, whatever relationship there is, and LGBTQI rights, and decolonization and whatsoever, for us this is within our manifesto, so we could say on national TV, LGBTQI rights are okay. And this is something, I think, yeah, but I mean, you have people that didn't want to come to Togo because of the fact that it was then said that, yeah, in fact, there are these problems and you can go into jail and whatsoever. I completely understand. There were also people who didn't always felt safe because there were jury members that scored them down because they talked about gayness or about whatsoever. Well, there were also jury members that gave extra points for that. So I mean, but then you get the comment like, yeah, I didn't feel safe because the people gave me less score. Yes, okay, but there was at least one member of the jury that for these type of poems gave extra score. So
generally speaking, scores are not safety related.
No. Yeah, but I mean that's also something. Is a competition a safe space? No, it can never be a safe space. But then you're there, you're in the country, and then you're able to do that. And then I think like, this is what we as a Slamily. It's not my invention. Sorry. We have sort of put that bar there and put the seed there of the fact that perhaps at a certain moment there will be the possibility of more freedom and more possibility to sort of express yourself and to just talk about it without having to fear for the fact that there is a prison sentence for that. I mean, it's these type of things where a revolution never starts big. Yeah. It always starts very small and tiny. Yeah.
And arts are always at the forefront of making such change happen.
Yes.
Specifically poetry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lenka, sorry.
Ďakujem. Thank you guys. So, dobre, slovenčina. Slovenčina, in Slovak. Sorry.
No, please.
I still hear some Slovakian.
We can still understand you.
Super. Chcela som reagovať na viacero vecí. Asi najprv poviem, Peter mi nerozumie, tak o ňom budem rozprávať. Peter hovorí často o tom, že slamer by mal rozprávať zo srdca, že by to malo ísť z jeho vnútra, to isté rozprával aj Philip a rozpráva sa o nejakých pravidlách, že nie sú možno až tak dôležité. Poviem presný opak. Pre mňa sú pravidlá absolútne dôležité, absolútne. A chcem povedať aj prečo. Pretože sú to nejaké inštrukcie, ktoré aj slamera nútia spraviť to, čo ja ako porodca vyžadujem. To znamená, že jeho telo pri slame, to je tá zmena, o ktorej hovoril aj Philip, sa stane rezonančnou dutinou, sa stane textom. Vaše telo sa stane manifestom, vaše telo sa stáva apelom. A bez toho, napríklad, aby bolo nastavené pravidlo žiadnych rekvizít, pravidlo žiadnych barokových dekoratívnych scén, bez toho by to nešlo, alebo bez nejakého kostýmu. To je veľmi dôležité pravidlo, ktoré vás potom núti urobiť z vlastného tela tú rezonančnú dutinu. A to, o čom hovorím, že to je dôležité, že to telo sa musí stať manifestom, apelom, textom.
Thank you. I think I understood most of it.
Okay, so
It was a good slam.
Okay, but yeah, you will need to help me with the last word that you said. But yeah, so I wanted to react to what mainly Peter said, that a slammer should really speak from his heart, that it should come from his inside. Also, Philip mentioned it. And that rules are not that important, and I don't agree. I think they are very important. And why? Because those instructions for the slammer is something that I, as a juror, need from the slammer. And so it's important that it becomes like a resonance in the text, and that his body becomes like a manifesto. And also the rule that there are no costumes, for example, is something that your body needs to become this. And I'm sorry, I cannot translate the thing that you said, the resonance dutina.
Space.
Yeah, space for resonance. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Let me add one more thing. All limitations are also working in our favor creatively. You know, we need a narrowed focus so that we can create. You know, when you tell someone, "It's okay, now create whatever." Do whatever is too big. It's not a good space. You know, you need limitations, and then you can flow.
There's a Russian writer, I want to say it's Pushkin, but I could be wrong, so someone should Google this. But there's a Russian writer my mother quotes all the time, and it's that a net makes for fine fishes, right? That the idea that in the case of the quote, the original intention was that censorship or like government enforcement forces people to write more precisely,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And I do think that the 3-minute rule is a really interesting part of it. In America, we had, for our individual slams, we had 4 different rounds with 4 different time limits, right? 3 minutes was great because those were your hits, right? Those were your top hits. But the 1-minute round was so exciting and different because you still had to do everything you did in 3 minutes, but in a third of the time. And so 1-minute poems for a long time were like the jam. They were so cool. But regardless, I do think that just the presence of any rules, any restrictions of some kind, definitely it's important. Like I will agree that rules as an idea conceptually are what's up, and also specifically things that guided us away from brief theater, right? One of the ways that American slam got so desperately boring is we had group pieces, and the group pieces always scored well. And so what you ended up with was like the all singing, all dancing slam review, and it was one of those things where towards the end there, it was every round, every team in the finals, it was like group piece after group piece after group piece of essays at a volume. And I just remember being like the guy on Twitter who was like putting out various reaction GIFs, just getting like, you know, like, because it was just so exhausting and so by its very nature contrived. Right? And so it's so lovely to not have that. Yeah.
Vrátim sa aj k tomu časovému limitu, pravidlu časového limitu. Keď slamujete v rámci 3 minút, tak vy v hlave, keď idete napríklad improvizačný slam, musíte mať nejaký koncept. Čiže je to o talente, je to o spôsobe premýšľania a tie 3 minúty vás nútia fungovať v nejakom koncepte. Jednak buď keď je improvizačný slam si ho vytvoriť a ešte keď je improvizačný slam, vy fungujete na princípe už nejakých slovných spojení, ktoré máte vopred premyslené a viete ich len dávať do kontextu. Veľmi pekným príkladom je Anatol Svahilec. Ten funguje presne na týchto v úvodzovkách pre mňa polotovaroch, ale v tomto prípade je to veľmi dobré, čiže on už len spája do nejakého kontextu. Ale tým pádom slamer, keď má časový limit 3 minút, a hovoríme napríklad o tom improvizačnom slame, tak ukazuje nielen svoj talent, ale aj svoje jazykové zručnosti, aj hovorím, tú schopnosť vidieť veci v kontexte a vedieť vybrať z tej zásuvky v hlave, použiť nejakú tú syntagmu, čiže slovné, nejaký kúsok vety a zapasovať ho tak, aby sedel a mohol byť ešte aj vtipný alebo dosiahol tú potrebnú emóciu. Čiže aj ten časový limit 3 minút, keď sa tu o tom rozprávalo, to nie je len freedom speech, to nie je len o nejakej naozaj voľnom prúde reči, pretože aj ten slamer, ktorému dáte 3 slova, ako to zvykne byť, tak aj ten slamer vlastne funguje už na princípe nejakej predprípravy. Toto by asi mali vedieť aj diváci, ale tu sú len slamery, čiže asi zbytočné.
To je divák, nech sa postaví.
Okay, so just going back to the time limit rule, the 3 minutes rule. So when you are slamming and you are improvising, so you need to have a concept already prepared in your head, and it is important to have talent for this. So when you are improvising, this principle, you need to really select the words or the word groups that you will talk about. And a person, Anatol Svahilec, he is a good example for this. So you already need to have this pre-prepared concept in your head. So when you are slamming with this 3-minute rule, you need to have a talent. You need to really pick the words. You need to really think in your head beforehand, and also show your language skills. How you can really select the words, the syntagmas, all the things that you will actually say in those 3 minutes. So it can be funny, there can be humor, and there can be everything that you want. So it's not, again, about just this freedom of speech, but it's about all the words that you will say, and you need to have preparation beforehand.
I just wanted to sort of like react on both, because yeah, indeed, sort of like going back to the idea of the 3 minutes, the 1 minute, and whatsoever, the variety of that to make sure that you can, as a poet, sort of like go into this is very interesting. At a certain moment, I don't know if anybody of you knows the Queen Elizabeth competition for musical instruments and singing. So it's sort of like one of the biggest competitions that for piano or for cello or for voice or whatsoever. And the rules there is, so you have at a certain moment, you can choose a part of the program, but then there is for every slammer, for every musician an obligatory piece, and then for the finalists there is a piece that is created specially for the final, and that they then need to study in 1 week and then go and perform. So at a certain moment I tried that in Belgium as such, because I thought like, yeah, if you would do a classic poem, like a classic sonnet or whatsoever, and then because we were in Belgium, so everybody needed to write a Dutch poem and a French-speaking poem, that was a disaster. But then also a classic Dutch and a classic French in these languages, and then sort of like have a little improvisation piece, so that you can definitely see that the artist as a whole is capable of doing something. It was perhaps too ambitious to do that in 2 languages, but as a principle, I quite like this. On part of improvisation, what you sort of said, I'm going again to Holland, because, and this is, some concepts you can only do because the people understand the language. You can do that in language. So, for instance, for the finals, the two last poets, they battle against each other. So that's the one starts, and the one who starts can never end. And then there is 7 minutes that they need to interact, and they interact onto each other's texts, partly improvised, but the ones that win have definitely prepared already certain things, but then you still need to do that towards then that text that has been there. But these are concepts that are very beautiful, but they only work if you do that in one language, and if people, the poets, each other, like here in a European context or in a worldwide context, you cannot do that because you don't understand the other language, or you need to sort of look at the translation and then...
For now, once we have, a couple more years...
With AI...
Yeah, God, I hate it, but it is really good for that specific thing.
Yeah. You know? then it's like the universal translator of Star Trek.
We will have we will do so-called prompt slams. I'd like to make a note. I know several improvisers. They are quite common in the Czech slam poetry scene. And once Honza Dibi Tanzel, he visited my slaminar, and he told us how he works, what his trainings are like. So when he travels the city, when he's on a tram, he keeps working non-stop, making rhymes, making associations between elements, and also, and that is very important, making dissociations. You cannot keep the track, you have to sometimes step aside. It's a very precious skill, you know. So these, and I know from several improvisers, they all do that. There's a lot of hard work behind their skills.
I agree.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I will have a last question for everyone. then some questions from audience. I hope Sibyl will ask something. And I certainly know you will ask something. And then we can discuss end of it at the bar. So the one and same question for everybody, because we have the jury and we have the Philip. Yeah. You are special. You are so.
I'm just normal like everybody else.
This is special.
Just more crazy than the others.
No. Maybe specific with you three, like the jury. What did you finding for in the text of these 32 poets, which we all competed in the European Championship, and for you two, what were you finding as slammers or slams to be good? What slam has to have to be good? So whatever, who will start?
I don't know, maybe, is it a good idea, to start highlighting some persons, before
No, don't name the persons, name the thing.
Okay. Well, it doesn't matter in my case because I was too busy and I haven't been able to read any except for the English poet.
Yeah, I know. This is why I asked in general.
Let me say one thing. The Czech slam is still very haha oriented.
Yeah.
It's all about fun, and the funny guys, they always win, We never have really poetic winners, The best poet in the group never wins, never ever. Maybe at the Family Slam, yes.
Yeah, it's a universal
that's no, my own experience from the European Championships is that there's so much poetry going on. It's so good. There is some fun too, but it's not the basic element. The Czech slam is all about haha. Yeah. So I'm gonna enjoy that. It's gonna be tough. 32 guys. My brain is gonna explode, but I will happily explode for you. And also, what is really crazy here is that in Czechia we normally have just 10 points from 1 to 10. That's it. Here we have decimal points. I mean, this is gonna be like 9.1.
Yes. To 9.9.
That's crazy. I have to invent a system. I have been. I'm gonna spend some time in cafes around Košice. And trying to find a special formula and equation where authenticity and poetry and performance and whatever comes together and gives me points. And whoa!
No. Stop him. Yeah.
I don't know how you guys are gonna do it. The jury members in the audience. But for us, it's a very challenging job. Please tell me about your method. How are you gonna do it?
No, asi budem reagovať aj na Česko, Slovensko, keď si rozprával o českom slame, tak ja poviem čosi o slovenskom slame, lebo máme tu aj slovenských slamerov. Slovenský slam má veľmi veľa žien a má ich od začiatku, čo je zaujímavé. To znamená, že my máme veľmi silný femislam, toto je ako super a myslím si, nech sa Tomáš a hoci aj urazí aj ostatní, ale že ženy sú o mnoho silnejšie. Slame.
V tej poezii.
Áno, jednoznačne. Tie výpovede sú aj umelecké, dokážu sklbiť aj tú artistnosť, aj umeleckosť, aj silu výpovede. Je to umenie, ktoré je funkčné v ich prípade, preto hovorím väčšinou o ženách. Pre mňa je na Slovensku topkou Potopa, Baša, Mara. Pre mňa je veľmi pekný aj slam, keď ho robí Táňa, biblický slam, že tiež je to forma slamu, ktorá je u nás nedocenená. Som bola veľmi rada, ak by ešte niekto aj toto robil, skúšal. Takže toto sú pre mňa také topky, nebudem hovoriť tohtoročnú víťazku, ale áno, chcem povedať aj to, že, a čo očakávam, ešte chcem povedať aj to, že čo očakávam a aj ako porodkyňa od tohto ročníka, očakávam, že prinesie okrem silnej výpovede aj výpoveď, ktorá bude funkčná. A to je tiež taká zvláštna vec, že čo je to funkčnosť. Veľmi jednoducho, ak používate napríklad vulgarizmy, tak ich nepoužijete len tak, lebo potrebujete vyplniť priestor. A to isté očakávam, že slam nebude zneužívať tému. A toto je pre mňa tiež taká alfa omega. Nezneužíva tú tému, vedieť priniesť iný pohľad aj na 150 krát prezentovanú už tému a dokázať byť uveriteľný aj v tej performancii, aj možno v ríme, aj v rytme a malo by vytvoriť to ten balíček, ktorý je harmonický v tom pravom význame slova.
Okay, so I would just like to talk about Slovak slam, as you already mentioned the Czech slam. So we have a lot of women, and it's nice that we have them from the beginning, from the start. And I think that they are stronger in the poetry, and so they are really artistic, they have strong expression. And I would just like to mention Basha and Mara and also Tanya, and who is doing a biblical slam, and I would really like some new people try this as well. And so what are also my expectations? I would like that their expression, their performance is also functional. And what does it mean? It means that, for example, if you are using vulgarisms, you don't use them just because, but you have a reason why you are using them. And that you do not like overuse the theme, that you will bring something new, a new perspective, and that it will be credible.
Yeah, you don't abuse the theme, yeah, true.
Peter, how it's in Hungarian? What do you, what slam have to be good, in your opinion?
I mean, for me, the heartfeltness, and also I talked to several friends about how they think as a jury member, and one told me that the slam should be nuanced with reflection and a good sense of proportionality. So if someone is talking about the subject and carries herself or himself away like to exaggerations, which makes it not credible, then that person can lose the audience. Then you cannot go with her or him. But if one keep, so I also talked to Jan, the Estonian friend slammer, who was on several international jury, and he about the specific issue we are facing here, that the translation will be projected and someone will speak. And one person has two eyes, usually. and so then I asked Tomáš, and so we received the translations. So, and I'm glad that I will still have some time to further look at them. But reading them already and looking at them, so I started to have a picture. Of course, I will keep myself totally open for the performance, so I'm not making judgments in advance. But from the text, it seems to me that it's a variety, and there are some, I'm not saying names, I'm not saying against anyone, but some sort of stand-up-like thing. And I think slam is a lot deeper than stand-up. Because stand-up is about making ha-ha, and slam is about, for me, it's like when it captures this, what this expresses personal is political. So when it's about personal things, that someone becomes, in a way, someone puts his heart on stage. At the same time, it's a credible, nuanced, proportionate reflection on the social surroundings. Because, so a small example, and then I finish that. So I have been a free speech scholar as well, focusing on so-called hate speech. And as for a free speech scholar, it's a special issue for me, because if there is a slammer, for example, talking about the square of a small town, and she or he talks only about the love story she went through in a little park in that square. And she or he doesn't talk about the school on the other side of the square where Roma children may be segregated. And of course she has the freedom of thought, or he has the freedom of thought and freedom of speech not to cover that part. I respect free speech, freedom of art, but it's closer to me when she or he think that I developed an ability, I may have some talent to speak, so why should I be silent about those things? So this is somehow what, and in my special way to religion, I prayed, and with the Bob Dylan line, with God on our side, we will be on the jury on Friday and Saturday.
I'd like to add one more thing. Nick Cave says that for a good creation, both in the sense of quality of performance and both in the sense of easy writing that it's writing itself, you know, you need to be taking risks. It's only when you endanger yourself, only then something new, something special can happen. And this is what I'm gonna look for in the slammers, and this is what you are doing in your workshop.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I have translated him, so I really enjoyed that, and yeah.
I think, kind of talking briefly about genre, you know, American Sign, what we have going for us, I think, or had going for us, is very similar to what we have going for ourselves kind of across the board, which is variety, right? There's all kinds of things happening at once, you know. There are strategic choices we would make in a competition where maybe one team was bringing funny and it was really killing a room, like it was just so funny and they were winning and winning and winning, and then you'd have someone play something deeply personal about trauma, and yeah, maybe it doesn't score that well, but for the rest of the slam, everything funny looks cheap. Yeah. And so there is something really lovely about having these different dynamics to choose from. I personally think of humor and making people laugh as a tool. A lot of my work starts funny and then gets you, right?
Yes.
And
tragedy and comedy.
I think that this is like a really effective method of communication. It's like why I choose to do it, and I love it when other people do it. So what I'm looking forward to, I think, is just watching people make work that is sort of hitting the 3 points for me, which is just like that it's discursive, right? That it like encourages conversation, that it's instructive or educational, that it brings me information I didn't have before, and that it kind of hits that aesthetic ideal of truth and beauty in one place, you know? So like, tell me something that's true to you, make me think about it in a way that like leaves me like wanting to talk to somebody else about it and like maybe like really get into it, and teach me something that I didn't know already, you know? Obviously everyone is aware of, well, not everyone, but many people, and certainly people in this context, are aware of a lot of the social problems of the world. But something really specific, like something like that school, for example, is an excellent example of something that I wouldn't necessarily know, and giving me that piece of information is such a gift from another artist. And so that's what I'm hoping for the most, certainly.
Philip, we start this formal round with you, so we will end it with you. You as organizer of World Poetry Slam, which is the big level.
Well, I mean, I think it's I agree with a lot of things that have been said.
But
forgot the comma.
And the function is very important. First of all, indeed texts are provided in an English translation. There is an adagio amongst translators: toutes les traductions sont des trahisons. Every translation is treason. Because you need to choose as a translator where you go. Will you translate a certain situation and you will transpose it to where you would see this? If you take, for instance, the Roma village and you would translate it somewhere in Africa, would you then go to the shanty towns or whatsoever, or would you still keep it there? Would you go with the rhythm and the rhyme, or would you go with the imagery, where then you lose the rhythm and the rhyme? So these are choices that the translator makes. The translator is a co-creator with the fact that there was an original text, but it's still a new original text based on the old original text. And there are a lot of studies, I mean, academics can definitely relate to that, on why the hell did this person... I still remember that there was Vallejo, one of the 1920s, a fantastic poet that had a lot of sound plays, and I read this in Dutch in the translation, and I called the translator, when I saw the translator, I didn't call it, but when I saw the translator, and I said like, why did you do that? I mean, because he has at a certain moment when he's in prison doing the sort of like in Spanish it almost does not exist, but he used the b sound finally there, and sort of like, and this made sense, and you could use that word in Dutch for that, and then the guy was looking at me, yeah, but I'm the translator and I made the choice, and so like, yeah, but I mean, come on, have a discussion on that. Anyway,
There's no answer, yeah.
there is no answer, but this is then the difference between poets that are writing for paper versus poets that write for performance, because you look also at different ways in that moment.
Well, I reject that dynamic. I think it's both and both. You gotta do it for both.
Yeah, but yeah, fine, but
sorry.
When the old
at the bar.
Yeah, the bar. But
we have to finish it.
No, it's sorry. I didn't
I think authenticity, whatever, if you indeed use something comical or whatsoever, make sure that there is at least one line or something that has been said that people will remember for the rest of their lives. I mean, these are the sort of I just want to have I will do like Peter. I will end with a little example. I was in South Africa, and then we went to one of the townships, and we were there as international poets for a class of 16-year-old girls in a girls' school with no windows and what. Really, there was no paper. Terrible. And the kids were doing their poetry, and we as international we needed to talk something. And there was a girl there, and she started with a poem, typical teenage poem. He didn't tell me that he loved me, and that was sort of that every time came back. And in the beginning I was sort of, oh, okay, let's sit straight, let's listen to it. And then it went on, and it was definitely how they met and blah blah blah, but he didn't tell me that he loved me. It went on for quite a while and became very boring. And then at a certain moment, my attention was, because then he sort of said to her, "You never eat candy with the wrapper on." That line. And I said, wow, this is a super good line, because she's now talking about the fact that they want to have sex and he doesn't want to use a condom. Just for the people that were not following. So, and then it went on and on and on. And then the last line was, I went to the doctor and I was not pregnant, but I did get AIDS. And you're standing there, and you need them to do a comment, and I'm sort of like, yeah, well, I should sort of like change the beginning a little bit, but for the rest, it's very touching. And that's what sort of like this for me is a poem that I will remember for the rest of my life. Also the context and whatsoever, because you know it's a personal story. I mean, the only thing is that you know that this has happened to her, but it's so universal. It's so universal, and it's sort of like, and just sort of like this one imagine this candy with the wrapper. It's sort of like that's the thing that sort of snapped me out of the boringness. Let us say.
But it would be incomplete if it wasn't boring at the beginning. It's part of it.
Yeah. The trick is to make the boredom just long enough. But like seriously, like if it's too long, too boring, then people will tune out. But if it's just boring enough, people are like, oh god, and then you get them. Ooh,
yes,
that's a great piece.
And that's sort of like if at the end of the championship there is whoever wins, or there are a few people where definitely there are a few lines or one line that you remember from that, that means that they have succeeded. And where you can discuss about if that's good or bad. I mean, even you can discuss about the things that you thought was completely shitty, but they can be very good because they are completely shitty. I mean, and that's, I think, authenticity getting you, sort of like, wow, where is that? And then that can be funny, that can be very deep, that can be, and please, microphone technique. Don't go close to the microphone and start shouting from the beginning. No, I mean, there is a possibility. The harder you shout, the further you go away from the microphone, please, because I have very sensitive ears. I'm not in the jury, but if that happens and I would be in the jury, I would mark immediately 2 points down.
So, this was the formal part of the discussion. Thank you very much. I have to tell you that we are very, very glad that we can translate, I think, near to half text from the original languages, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So this is quite nice.
It was done by students here.
Yeah, it was for Univerzity in Prešov and Jelgavura, and he really actively searched for. I have Estonian text. Is there any Estonian there? Wow. I have Ukrainian text.
So great!
Yes,
super.
Oh wow!
So we. I think like
you're an example. I mean, you should definitely sort of help us with the European project. Yes, you should.
Yeah. So I have to tell there is this thing which we are very proud of, that we can do it like with local funding and Slovak funding should end the next year, because the Ministry of Culture in Slovakia is really like fighting against the culture in Slovakia. So slam poetry Slovakia is part of open culture, it's called. So just take it in mind, like we can do this because of government funding and local funding, and we are still fighting against our minister because she just want to see Slovak culture and no other. So this is the fight we really fight, and if you can help us from any country in Europe or US, we will be very happy.
Today we are all part of Slovak culture. She should be happy.
Yeah, but she won't. So that said, is there any questions? We have like 5 minutes or 10 for the audience.
I have one.
If you have it in Slovak, Simona will translate it. Don't worry.
Not a single problem with English.
Okay.
If I may ask every one of you, how did you start writing the slam, and what motivates you? Is something behind it, like some coincidence, or you just immediately knew that you want to do it?
We have 10 minutes, guys.
I'm editing right now in my head. I have this one ready to go because people ask me this question all the time. I used to be a musician in a band, and then my band broke up, and I was desperate for stage time, and so I had somebody try me to slam. It's a true story. And then I loved poets so much I kept going back. And you know, the thing is that as a performance artist, when you work in slam, there is just no other drug like it. It is so naked, you are so vulnerable. If you fuck up, it's only you. It's so much rests on your shoulders. But also just a lot of things kind of happened back to back, and it made me feel like that was where I belonged. So that's how I got started, but I think I stay with it because of all of the reasons that we all love it, right? And
money.
Oh yeah, that's it. Trust me.
Definitely.
Nope.
Yes. Well, I can also be quite. I'm not. This year I'm 36 years on stage with my own work. I started the pre-slam period even. But then at that moment, yeah, I started when I was 6-7 years old, not on stage. But I did sort of like courses in the academy, and then we read poetry for stage. We were sort of like theaters. But then, and at a certain moment, when you then become a teenager, it's sort of like, yeah, but I can also write this shit. It's sort of like, and then I started sort of writing, and then when I was 18, then at that moment, so you can count. So then I sort of said like, yeah, I will do this on stage, and from that point on, I sort of like went on, and then when slam came, then then from performance poetry, I've done all the different things, so from academia, sound poetry, to performance, to immersive, and whatsoever. I'm now doing a PhD even in bringing visual poetry as an immersive experience. Why? Because it's fun. I mean, definitely, if ever you go to Africa, that's the place where for me, during the pandemic, in December 21, I was invited to Mozambique, and I went there and was at that moment, finally breathing. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. When I grow up, I was then already 50, but anyway. And then sort of like when you're done in South Africa and you're on stage and people live give you comment, live whilst you are busy, not like in Europe where everybody sits like, and then in the end they sort of, you did nice. No, there it's sort of like, yeah, fucking bro, I need you, yeah. Or sort of like, I follow you, I feel you. I mean, you get that from a room of 400-500 people there that are shouting towards you. I mean, I've smoked everything that you can smoke, but that beats
Bob?
I have nothing to say. I'm imagining the crowd, you know, this direct communal experience. I just love that, you know. It's wow. I'm stuck. No words.
Peter, why and how you did slam?
In 2010, in New York, we did discussions about the upcoming chapters, work in progress for a constitutional law collection of essays on regulation and responses of so-called hate speech, so racist and other speech. And one of my own chapters were about how to respond to incitement to hatred by art. And before I went to New York, I arranged the Budapest end of something I called New York Budapest Anti-Racist Pro-Diversity Slam Poetry Night. In New York I found the Living Theater, which I learned was a famous anarchist theater, and we connected the two places with streams. And I think I would have written a text myself anyway, but what gave further inspiration that I was trying to court a dancer, singer, woman. And I asked her whether she would sing a song about this subject just as an addition to the slams, and she said she didn't have lyrics on this. And in that I had some sort of self-confidence, so I immediately said, I write one for you. So I wrote my first slam actually for her, but she had dance rehearsal in the Metropolitan Opera. She's a very serious dancer. So she couldn't come. So I read the text that I wrote to her, and then I came home. I was reading the text at some places, and then we had the demonstrations in Budapest in response to the abuse of power by constitution-changing majority, which is still governing Hungary. And I finished here after one demonstration, a poet, rapper friend said, Peter, we are supporting the pub and by performing some slams. Are you coming? And there was half an hour left, so I asked the paper and the pen at the bar, and I quickly, then I was writing down my slams, not anymore. And so I wrote a slam, The Demonstrator. And I just love it. So one could say maybe I just fell in love with slam.
Lenka, when you start writing your first slam?
Do it.
Dobre. To bolo, ja neviem, asi skôr, než som začala učiť slam, som napísala svoje prvé slamy, ale moja skúsenosť písania slamovej poézie bola veľmi rýchla a veľmi rýchlo aj skončila, pretože nepísala som slamy, ktoré by boli kvalitné, nedokázala som to zo seba dostať tak, ako by som si predstavovala. Mám bližšie k politickému slamu, čiže a k feministickému slamu. A mám pocit, že sa lepšie vyjadrujem v takých tých tradičnejších formách poézie. Teda nie je to len pocit, viem, že ten slam mi nešiel, takže som ostala pri hodnotení a pri tom, že budem učiť ľudí o slame a sprostredkovávať im tento druh umenia. A aj vďaka tomu som v úvodzovkách vychovala na akademickej pôde niekoľko slamerov, ktorí aj dnes slamujú, čiže v tom vidím väčší zmysel vo svojom prípade.
Before I started teaching, I wrote my first slams, but I think that they are not good or of good quality, and I prefer political slams or feminist slams and more traditional forms of slams. So that's why I am just a juror. And that I teach slam, and I think that I also brought up some slammers that are here today and that are competing.
Yeah. If I may, just not moderate, but finally say something. No, for me, it was I start with haiku because when I was 14 or 15, I started like practice Buddhism, and there was like not so many books about it. And there was all books you can have on the topic was in Czech language. So I started reading Basho and Isa in Czech language. And then I somehow found Kerouac's haikus. And then I found Ginsberg, and then I was fucked completely.
Very Ginsberg, yeah.
Yeah, and I always have in mind like if in this post-Soc East European capitalistic era of East Slovakia, if I want to be a poet, I have to get paid for it, because otherwise I would have no respect for society. Like if you don't pay by it, it's not a job, so you are not a valid person, you know? And I'm already crippled by heart, so I don't want to be crippled by my job as well. So I really want to find the way how to be paid by the poetry, and then on the festival, on Pohoda Festival, it's a very local festival in Trenčín. That was the biggest festival in Slovakia. There was poetry slam Czechoslovakian, so 8 Czechs and 1 Slovakian. It's always like this. It's like Czechoslovakian army, you know. Yeah, and I was like, okay, this is it. This could buy me a future. So I go to Anatol Svahilec and I tell him like, okay, I want to do this. I want to fucking do this. And he was like, okay, so do it. And I was like, there is nothing else in Slovakia. Was, yeah, no, do it. So I started to organize things in Slovakia. Then I moved to Prague, when I was the first Slovak slammer who I think shined in the Czech scene. And then I moved back because after COVID, or in COVID, people from Košice artistic scene was, okay, we want you back. We will pay you, but we want you back and we have to establish you. So for me, writing things, telling what I want, it's to have this self-value of, yeah, I can do it in the high level, I can do it very strongly, I can talk from the heart, but it still has to be poetry for me. But for me, it's always also teaching it in the European level, this local scene in this end of the world. So this is very important.
I guess you're one of the reasons that the Slovak scene is so much poetry slam.
Yeah.
And there's more focus on poetry than on humor as in Czechia.
Yeah.
That's a good observation.
Yeah, I don't know. So, other questions? Do we have it? Okay.
I maybe have one.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Just one.
Je pre Lenku, môžem po anglicky alebo po slovensky?
Po slovensky.
Po slovensky. Že keď si hovoril taký ten svoj pomyselný rebríček, že niekde je tam to precítenie, ako hovoril Péter, a potom niekde boli tie pravidlá, ktoré boli pre vás také dôležitejšie alebo veľmi také smerodajné. Tak kde v tomto rebríčku je taká tá technická zručnosť, alebo nejaká to používanie tých trópov, tie aliterácie, tie všetky figúry a trópy, že kde toto máte na tom pomyselnom rebríčku?
Okay, so I would just like to ask, when you were talking about feelings in slam and the rules, So could you maybe point out on your scale where is the technical skill, where people should use alliteration and others? So where would you put it on your scale?
Nie je to rebríček. To vôbec nie. Nie je to odstupňované. Jednoducho, aj keď sa dívam na písaný básnický text a nemám tam slamera, tak musí vzniknúť jednota týchto prvkov. A niekedy môže byť veľmi dobrý, keď sme pri slame, aj slamový text, ktorý vôbec nepoužíva trópy, ani figúry, vôbec nepoužíva oxymorony, kalambúry. Môže to byť veľmi prostý text v používaní básnických prostriedkov. Vôbec ich dokonca nemusí používať. O to zložitejšie je potom podať ten text inak. A teraz nemyslím len na to fyzické podanie, na tú prácu s telom, na tú prácu s intonáciou, s rytmom, ale myslím aj na tú perspektívu, ktorá by sa v tom texte mala zračiť. Lebo potom naozaj chcem výraznú pointu, aj výrazné tie mikropointy ešte v rámci toho textu, aj tie zvraty, o ktorých sa tu už hovorilo, čiže toto je pre mňa nesmierne dôležité, aby ten text potiahol niekde inde. A ak používa napríklad trópy, figúry, a teraz sa bavíme naozaj o nejakom slame, ktorý nie je bizár slam napríklad, kde je to zámerne nefunkčné, kde sa to používa len pre tú srandu, tak aj tie figúry nesmú byť len formou. To je tiež veľmi dôležité, čiže musí tam byť spojenie formy a obsahu. A to je tá harmónia, o ktorej tiež sa tu už viackrát hovorilo. Čiže nie je to odstupňované v rámci nejakého rebríčka, ale je to jednota všetkých týchto elementov, o ktorých sme dnes hovorili.
Okay, so for me it is not a scale actually. It is really a unity of all those elements. So even if I see a text, a slam text, and I just read it, there doesn't need to be any of those technicities that you're mentioning, the oxymoron or the alliteration. It can be very simple, but you just need to perform it differently. It just needs to have a point. You need to take it to another level. And if you decide to use those technical elements, there needs to be a meaning to it. You cannot just use them because you want them to be or something, but there needs to be a form connected with the meaning.
Peter, wants to react?
Yeah, thank you. When I prepared for the European final 6 years ago, I noticed that sometimes what can happen that you may fall in love a bit with some rhyming lines. And so, but those lines may not really express what you want to say. So I started my performance with saying that was a line I said in the first two lines, both in Hungarian and in English, that I don't give a thought for a rhyme. Yeah. So I'm not exchanging what I want to say for a rhyme. And when I was reading the text of the 32 performance, I saw in several places that some sort of like perhaps an idea that the slam should rhyme, or it's better if it's rhyming, or some parts are rhyming, it may lead to some forced rhymes. So it's, and also sometimes if it's rhyming, it has to be really good. Yeah. Some kind of clean rhyming, not just like not so well. And just really quickly, another thing about the technical part, that I have been reading my slams for like 6-7 years, and then I started to learn them. Of course, if you write down, and that's a technical thing, the slam, and then learn it, the key thing that when you have the text for sure, so you don't have to worry about it that you will forget on stage, that's only, then you are not ready on stage. Then you still become one with the text. I'm not saying there was an obscene word once come to my mind what you need to do with the text, but basically once I was preparing a double slam, 2 parts, and I felt as if I were in 2 relationships at the same time, and seriously. So you have to, and then I really finish with that I just want to raise the point for you that you may just forget about writing it down. For the last few years I have been experimenting, developing the text inside. A friend said once, I think it's a very important point, that if you read the text, it creates some sort of translation situation, not in language, but, and then I was thinking it further. So, if you have something inside, why do you go into a complicated process of putting it out first for something that carries the data, either paper, phone, tablet? Then, if you mind performing it by heart, then memorize it, stressed whether I remember, and then try to put it out again to the audience. Why just not while walking and falling asleep or whatever to friends, tell it many times. A wonderful Hungarian actor, director I mentioned said, if someone did not tell a text at least 100 times, there is nothing to talk about. So that, and that's a high standard, but that's about technique. You need to love sharing the story.
Do we have last question? Last, really last, or not? 5, 4. You have.
No, I just wanted to.
Okay. So no last question. No, they fact it.
I think whatever you do is functional. If you go to the classics and the oxymorons and the chiasms and whatsoever, it's very nice on paper when you read it. No, I mean it's like that. I mean, if you read poetry on a page and you don't understand it immediately, you can go back. Or if you say, oh wow, this is a chiasm that I find here between line 2 and 3, and then it goes further and and so on and so forth. It's very nice. If you're on stage, you have exactly 3 seconds to get your message across. That's the time between what you say and when the brain processes it with the audience. You have 3 seconds. So whatever technique you use, body as a body, your body as such, or the alliteration, or rhyme schemes, or whatsoever, it needs to work and it needs to be functional. And indeed, is it the sea is blue and I love you? Well, fantastic. But you can no. But I mean, it's sort of like, yeah, you can do whatever, but I mean, it needs to be functional. It needs to be there for a reason. Indeed, if you use all these techniques, and it's sort of like. Or you make something which is really about the techniques, that's something else, but otherwise it just needs to be functionally there. And if you use a sound in an alliteration, then it needs to bring something extra to it, as in it's the sound of whatever the thing is doing or whatever happens or whatsoever. I mean, it's sort of, and definitely you have 3 seconds to sort of get into the brain of the other. So whatever technique you use, if it's functional, it will work. If it's artificial, almost it's the same like, yeah, the text, learning it by heart and whatsoever. People will see that. You will feel that also as audience or as jury.
I will say, in the context of like judging, if that's what you're asking specifically, I don't think it's like good to look at technique and judge it for itself. I think everyone's kind of said it already, this idea of like, well, it has to serve a purpose. What I will say as like a writer who did a year of slamming with nothing but forms, like prescribed forms, so villanelles, sonnets, entombs, things like this. I will say that like once I got involved and invested in prosody, like the science or like the sort of like recipe behind the seeming magic of poetry, I found so many tools as a writer and as a performer that weren't there. One of my very best friends is a writer, Rachel McKibbin's incredible American poet, also a several times champion slammer. she writes everything in meter, and I didn't realize it because I loved the work, I loved the story, but it just wasn't something I noticed. And then after that, I was like, ooh, like I want to try that. And then when I tried it, I started writing everything in iambic, and it was for a book of poems about horses, and I wanted it to sound like, you know, right? But then I got stuck, and I kept doing it. And what I figured out was that iambic is like, actually, it's the storyteller's meter, and it made everything easier to memorize. So my whole book is in trochees or iambs, and it's like not something you'll notice unless you're looking for it. And I actually love those kinds of tools just as a writer. I think that those are really powerful, but as a judge, I think, like everyone said, it's really just about what you see and what you feel, you know. But yeah, I would definitely encourage everyone to investigate like the alchemy behind the form of poetry, because it's fascinating, endlessly so. Yeah.
And I like the idea that this also sort of like, today I'm going to write sonnets. Only sonnet. Tomorrow only haikus, and then indeed sort of like all these sort of medieval forms that are there. It's wonderful to sort of like to fuck up so many times before you get it right. And even in meter, I think it's so difficult.
I've been trying to make quantitative meter happen in English for the last 5 years. We can talk about it later, but like we're talking like a day for one couplet, and so like you know, so the challenge of it is like. But
and now I know why the poem was called, your poem I translated was called Villanella for the Wound.
Yeah.
And probably I missed the meter, fuck!
Well, geez.
So, guys, it was a wonderful 2 hours with you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Thank you, all of you. Please, big applause. Lenka Šafranová, Péter Molnár, Hýsek, Philip Meersman, Patrick Mulroy,
And Tomáš Straka!
Lenka Šafranová. And the audience, go.
Slavily! Our beloved Slavily!
All questions you was afraid to ask in public, we can answer at the bar.
Yeah.
So,
Let's do it. Please.